Thanks, Dawn. I just want to check this microphone works. I've said so many times I have so many and they all look the same and half broken, so thanks. And thanks, Dawn, and thanks, Audrey. That was such a lovely sharing. And thank you so much, Helen Hamilton, for joining us today for this Satsang. It's Mother's Day in the US today. I don't know if you know, Helen. Helen is actually from, I want to say my neck of the woods, but it's not really. It's north of England in West Yorkshire. And she's a spiritual teacher. We've shared her website on the site and on Facebook, but it's helenhamilton.org. And we'll share it again at the end. So I like to think this isn't an interview, but more just on facilitating so that everyone can ask questions and you can feel to share what you want to share. There's quite a lot of people here. So what I'm going to suggest is we're going to talk for about 90 minutes today, and we want to make sure there's loads of time for questions, because I know there's a lot of people here who must probably feel called to bring their own questions. So you can raise a hand on the Zoom app. That's if you click participants, you'll see a little raise a hand. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can also just raise your hand in the room. I'll try and switch views. I don't know if I can actually. So if there's anyone who's got a question that I'm not seeing, then I'm just asking Dawn or Anne or Kate if they can just flag who might have a question at those times when it's question time. And in case I don't see anyone, you can also type in the chat. So that's it. So thank you so much for joining us. And I wonder if I know many of your students, followers, friends are here, but maybe for Awakening Together's members, you might not be so familiar. So I just wondered if you might share with us a bit about yourself and your journey to awakening to start. Thanks, Helen.
Wow, that's a big subject. Thank you for inviting me to speak and to be part of this. It's wonderful. It was my own journey was perhaps quite long and unnecessarily painful. I think I just stumbled my way through most of it, really. It's really sort of the drive behind what I end up, doing in my teaching is to try and shortcut that process. As when I first joined, I've forgotten the lady's name, but she was talking about purification process, and I think that was the longest part of it for me, and it's not necessarily the easiest stage of the awakening process. So yeah, that was what took the time for me. I never really knew what I was searching for. I just knew I didn't feel complete inside. And really just there was this drive to find something that was whole inside, that wasn't, there's the two kinds of emptiness. There's the spiritual emptiness, and then there's this idea that our life is just, sense of a void inside that just I couldn't fill up with anything from the outside world, which I think is fairly common to everyone. Yeah. So, is there any sort of area you would like me to?
Well, I'm just wondering, sort of, who were the sort of, how did you go about it? Were there certain teachers that inspired you, that you read, certain sages that you looked towards?
I think I just read everything I could get my hands on. I mean, every teacher you could probably mention. I studied every major religion I could find, and then every sort of awakened being, contemporary, and the sages of old, and every single culture. I was just trying to find the common thread between them, and it was really just a culmination of all that something seemed to eventually start to happen. Started to believe in myself, and I must have watched about 1,000 hours of Muji, or maybe 2,000, and I was enough to see Adyashanti twice along the way as well, which was just amazing in terms of really being in that physical presence of someone who had already awoken at the time. It just began to really shift things.
Now, I know it's going to come up, so I thought maybe we'll talk about it now. You use this term Noumenon for self, and I thought maybe people here might not be familiar with that, and I wondered if you could talk about why that's a useful word and what it means.
Yeah, it's I just found I stumbled across this word noumenon in the dictionary of all places, and it really means that which cannot be perceived by the senses, can't be conceived of. You can't really think about it. That which is not a phenomena or an object, and it just really helped me because whenever I would say the word awareness or God or self, there was all this kind of vibration within me of unworthiness attached to those words, because I've been trying so hard for so long to find that truth. And it was just this word noumenon. It was the same thing. It's all, it has many names, but it has no real name, the self. But it just kind of wiped the board clean for me. I could come at it from a fresh place. It's really just defined as that which can't be perceived with the senses, human senses, that it's not an experience as well. And I think it's good because it's fresh and nobody has any preconceived ideas about it.
Yeah. And is it that the sense that it's opposite to phenomenon, or it is not an opposite because that would make two? What's the...
Yeah, it's kind of classified, I suppose, as the opposite. If you could think of a phenomenon as being something with a size and a shape and a duration, then the noumenon would technically be its opposite, in that it doesn't have any shape, it doesn't have any limits or boundaries, it doesn't have any duration, it just always is. So there isn't really an opposite to the noumenon. There aren't all these phenomena inside, but it just helps really to describe it as something, because I think a lot of us are. I know in my own journey, I knew that the self wasn't something I could perceive through my senses or with my mind, but I didn't really know how to go about finding it other than that. You'd hear teachers say, well, it's all around you all the time. And you sort of going, well, where is it? How am I supposed to find it then if it's everywhere and I can't use my eyes to see it? So just, it gave us a fresh start to it all, really.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the things you've talked about is in one of your books is about this. Well, there are two things that I know I've really taken in. One is that you really have to believe you can do it, and the second is like just this willingness to do it. So I wonder if you could maybe share with us what for you helped you sort of really grasp the fact that it was in your reach, in the way it's in all of our reach.
Yeah, I think after, a lot of years of trying as a separate someone to reach the self, to get there, it kind of became clear that I always felt like I was getting closer, but never actually arriving, I think, which is common to a lot of people. And it just occurred to me that if I was coming from ego or from mind, that there would always be this trying to get to something, and this unworthiness that was just rampant throughout my whole existence. I was trying to prove my unworthiness through my awakening, and it really wasn't working that way. When I reach the self, I'll feel worthy. And it just became clear one day that that's never going to work, because I'm saying I have to wake up to feel worthy. But then if I'm feeling unworthy, I'm never ever going to arrive. So I decided to kind of just start from, if all the sages say that you are that already, let me see if I can prove or even disprove that. It just decided to make more sense than trying to get somewhere through the egoic perspective, which is always working in duality and time and space. And I'm using that ego to try to see that which is outside of time and space. It just suddenly became obvious one day that that was never going to, why don't I try and start from the premise that I am already that, and see if it felt quite kind of blasphemous to do, but I thought, well, this other way isn't really working. So I found it exceptionally powerful. Then we don't have to keep then proving our own unworthiness, or our own doubts keep manifesting in terms of not arriving at awakening. Whereas if you start from the right place, we're seeing some quite quick growth there.
And I wonder if you can sort of give an example of how you do that.
It's really just a question, this particular problem I seem to be having, whatever is coming up in front of you along the pathway. It might be some negative emotion, some sort of karmic pattern that's coming up, some sense of not being good enough is one that I've mentioned. A lot of people struggle with fear. Anger as well was a big one for me, as well as fear. And really sort of looking at, well, if I am already that infinite self, is that true for me now? I found that in myself and in everyone that comes into satsang, more or less, that there is this willingness to believe everything that mind says. And while that might have been true as a separate being, we've all got loads of examples of where we didn't get what we want, or didn't feel ready for awakening, or whatever it is that we want. To compare that to the self, if I'm already the infinite and formless reality, is this idea still valid now that I am not good enough to get there? If I am already that, is there anywhere to get? It just began to undo my ability to believe these thoughts. Or if there's a sense I can't get what I want, then is that still true for me if I am already that? Is there anywhere to get, or to go, or even to become? And it's really the most effective way I found to get out of this automatic thing we have, where we just, mind says you're not good enough to do this, and we just completely agree, and then we feel terrible.
And I'm assuming it's not just like a thought comes up and you say to yourself, well, I'm that, I'm the Noumenon, so I can just ignore this. It's a deeper looking.
Yeah, I found contemplation, pretty much everything I do is like offering a question, because you can't just stop believing I'm not good enough and just start, I'm going to override that with another thought, because for most it's such a force of habit to go with that. And we can tell the amount of belief behind any idea by the amount of negative emotion we feel. So I was listening to Adyashanti and Byron Katie's work, and I just started to question, is this really true? And it became clear that if I ask that question, is it really true I'm not good enough, then I'm going to get several types of answer. I'm going to get my mind telling me all these answers, and I may get also an emotional answer to say, a feeling of guilt or shame or something like that. But if I keep with the question and I don't stop at these answers up here, which is what I've done many, many times, is that true for me now? Mine says, yes, it's true. Usually our questioning stops. But if you stay with the question and you go down into the emotional answers, and then the next answer is going to be an experiential answer to that question. Is it really true I'm not good enough? And just opening ourselves up to all of the answers that want to come to that question, it's going to take you to a deeper experience where it just becomes more obvious that your worthiness, or whatever it particularly is that we're questioning, is just not so. To the silence, to the stillness, to the Noumenon itself, awareness, whatever you want to call it. So just a question, it's really a process of learning to open up to all the answers. Human beings automatically focus on our mental answers only. Like that's the holy grail of the reference library of what we go to decide whether something's true or not.
And you did this just relentlessly? What?
Yeah, it started off as having to put some effort into it to remember to question. But I think it's well, it definitely was for me, and I see it in a lot of people, that I was just so tired of failing. I just couldn't. I hit this point where I just couldn't go back to my old way of, my old egoic sense. And I realized that I was living out these ideas. If I stop at the mental answer to that question, I'm going to keep experiencing it. If I continue to go deeper into the silence, I'm going to experience more silence. So when I got that realization, as I started to build some momentum, I actually really began to enjoy questioning. And my outside world began to mirror that back to me as well, that I wasn't quite believing it so much, and then less and less. And the questioning began to move from something that was a really efforting, and having to remember to question, to something that was just so wonderful. It actually became blissful in the end. Is that really true? Just not knowing something that I'd believed my entire existence, suddenly just starting to really see the evidence. It's just not true. So it became its own habit. It got its own momentum then.
Because I know we talk about this a lot in the Waking Together of this. We very easily quickly ask, like, what can we do? Like, what can we do? And then there's this sort of paradox of it's not you doing it, but you need something to do. So sort of listening to you, sort of saying that, yeah, there's a little bit of efforting, and then it kind of becomes smoother, I guess.
Yeah. Excuse me. If our mind is still thinking, it makes sense to give it an intelligent thought to think. So if it's going to be thinking and assuming I'm not good enough to get there, we might as well give it something intelligent, like, is that really true? Actually, there's nothing wrong with thinking per se, except that we are going to experience those thoughts that we really believe. We're going to keep creating experiences to prove to ourselves that we're not good enough. So it just it became a effortless thing in the end, but it did really begin to build. And once I saw that I could turn this pattern around, I just began to apply it everywhere. Every negative feeling that came up, I just began to sort of look at what is the story behind this, and then to begin to use the power of the self to overcome this. Like, if I ask the question, is it true? Then I'm opening myself up to all this grace and power that wants to come and help. But if I assume it is true, then I'm just little me with the ego, trying to transcend this thought. And they were like two very different experiences.
Maybe I'll just pause there. I don't know if anyone has any questions so far, or maybe even a belief that they can't seem to get their head around or get their head out of. Anyone? No? Okay. So, George, do you want to take the mic?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm enjoying your sharing, Helen.
Thank you.
In our fellowship, the concept came up of the ego holding us hostage. And I wonder if you could address that.
Could you just repeat that? The ego holding what, sorry?
Holding us hostage.
Hostage, yeah. This is quite a good way to describe it, really. I found in my own awakening that even once I'd seen that I wasn't that, I could see, I'd had several seeings of what was real about me, and but there was still this force of energy, this force of habit that was coming from ego. It was clearer and clearer. It was just kind of this energetic bundle of thoughts about myself that I'm still believing. And just because I'd seen that wasn't true, that there was still another stage or something else that had to happen, it didn't automatically undo the patterns of thinking in my head, you know, around the actual just the seeing wasn't enough. It was getting clearer and clearer what I really was, but I was still being thrown back into this egoic state. And there was more of a difference between what I'd seen myself to be and then what I was living as, you know, became very, very different. So it was, it definitely felt like that, like it was involuntarily pulled back into this lower energy field. And I think, like most of us do at that point, I started to really push against that and reject it and try to get rid of it, which really didn't work at all. But eventually I realized the questioning was a form of love, to try to understand, to even ask why I would, you know, is that true? That I feel that way? Is that really true? Was a way of welcoming these energies and loving them, but without believing them. And that really, it just began to undo this force of energetic habit. I think what you were referring to with the word hostage.
Anything else, George?
No, I think that's a good way to think about it. That you know, and I've heard it that the ego leaves us alone until we really get serious on the spiritual path, and then things just seem to come up that discourage us. So
I found that if we're looking at those things are going to come up, but it's how we handle them. If we look at them as if, you know, if I suddenly have this experience and I'm feeling all peaceful, and then this pattern comes back up, where suddenly I'm in a lot of fear or guilt or some anger. Like I said, for first I started to really reject that. I saw that as evidence that I was failing to deepen in my own awakening. And after a lot of suffering, I began to see that actually, if I want to live like this and it take over my life, be welcomed into my life, that these things have to come back up, and that they really are coming. They can be very forceful sometimes when they come, but they're coming because they sense the light or the peace or the clarity and the love that is the real self, and that they're actually also, these patterns, these emotions are on their own journey back to peace. But as an ego, as a separate being, I could never welcome them back. They were too scary or too overwhelming. So I really had to shift my attitude with them. You know, nobody wants to feel fearful when you've just been feeling peace, but you can welcome something without liking it, which was something that really, really helped me. That, okay, like this is just wants love like we all do. This fear just wants to be welcomed back. You know, it's been generated when I was, thought I was a separate being. And now that I have seen clearer what I am and I've got more clarity and peace and wisdom, I can allow this to come back for its own healing.
Anything? I saw Eileen's hand up. So Eileen, all yours.
Yeah, hi, Helen.
Hi.
I guess what I have loved about your teachings is the focus on the truth. Like, just it's here now. It's right here. Just be there. You know. I guess on my journey, I spent, you know, I'm 57, 56.98, percent of the time trying to do something about the egoic part of my life, trying to transform that. And I loved in your last Satsang where you did it so simply, like within 10 minutes, you guided me and everyone in the Satsang on like how to recognize that presence and so simply, and then just try and cultivate and work that. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that process, because I just found it so powerful.
Yeah, I found it's most important if someone can have the first thing is to try and have a direct experience of what you really are, because then it's not a theoretical thing up here, and it's not something you've heard somebody else talk about. It's actually something you've felt or experienced directly. And the major problem I come across with people is that they have all these ideas that it's very, very difficult to do, and that it takes a long time, which was my experience as well. And I realized I was believing that. And we haven't had so many examples of awakened beings because of this very belief. But so I'm always looking to try to give someone or to show someone that what they really are, because then even from that very first time of seeing it, even if it's only a few seconds, you've burst through these ideas even just once, that it's hard to see the truth, and it's hard to live as that truth. It just begins to shift the balance then, and in that place there is nothing wrong with you at all, and that becomes clearer that yes, you might want to develop some things in your personality, and yes, you might want to let some things go, but you're never going to achieve that from this place of ego's perspective that I've got to fix myself because I'm wrong, and that's where a lot of us are starting from in satsang. So I'm always trying to show someone there's nothing wrong with you, actually. You're exactly as you're supposed to be. And then that can become the power of the real self. When you experience it even for a few seconds, is beginning to loosen the hostage grip that we were talking about before, just through sheer force of habit, of believing these other thoughts. So I'm always trying to break those ideas down in people, that it takes a long time to find out what you are. And how can that be true if it is already what you are? Too many people, our whole human history has been an example of that belief in play, hasn't it? We've been experiencing that it takes a long time and it's difficult. And I just don't really see why that should be so, if it is already what we are.
Yeah, it was really helpful. Your talk about the solidity of things and how they're really nothing, and also us it's always the present moment. Like, I have really found your communication about it, we're just always only here, and what just quote unquote, it's the eternal present moment. I mean, that's been really helpful. If you want to just speak a little bit about that, because I listen to you and I feel it, and I go away and practice a little, and then I feel like I lose it again.
It's like anything. There's going to be some force of habit of thoughts, as we were saying before, going back to the past, imagining the past, remembering, imagining the future. But and that's, if we cannot beat ourselves up about that. Everyone does it until they don't, but gradually, as you spend time as the real self, even if it's just a couple of minutes a day, recognizing, noticing, tuning in, that is going to begin to override these thought patterns that at first I had to put effort into seeing and being that. And then I'd just be doing some random things during the day, working, driving, and it just become obvious that silence, that presence was just there without me trying to look for it. And it just became clearer and clearer that it's always there, it's always now. And that my ideas about am I going to lose this piece in when I've finished watching the satsang or something, they began to have less potency in them, just from it was like my body was just being kind of filled up with the power of the real self. And you just can't buy those ideas anymore, that I've got to work really hard to get back into that place. And that's just from a few minutes a day or more, if you can, of just sitting in that place, recognizing what's real about you. You're automatically starting to move away gently from all of that other stuff about you, that belief patterns we have that we kind of sabotaging ourselves with.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Sharon, did I see your hand up?
Hi, Helen.
Hello.
I just, in this group, most of the people have studied A Course in Miracles. You know, this is not, this is Awakening Together was another one I told you about, ACIM Gather. And I think what I have found out through all the studying is that when you separate the ego, and what you've taught me personally, because I've had, you know, I want to say that one-to-one sessions with you are dynamic. They really do work. You know, it's been wonderful. And actually quite reasonable too, comparatively. I've said that to you. So, you know, but as the ego, you know, when we separate the ego and make it like it's not part of the Noumenon or God, we actually are making it harder for us because we're taking that energy, just like like Jeff Foster's a teacher that I've looked at, and he always says everything is accepted into the awareness, where I didn't learn that in the course. Can you speak a little bit about how long you did the course? Because I don't think we talked about that in our sessions, just that we both shared that it does seem like it takes longer. I want a direct experience because it's been over a decade, and when I've met you, since I've met you, I have more direct experience than I've ever had. So I just wanted to tell the group that. Thank you.
Yeah, Course in Miracles is amazing. When I was trying to remember before I got on this session, like how long ago it was that I last read it, but it was just so powerful. It was one of the first things I ever came across that really just challenged directly everything that I thought was true. I can't remember the lesson number, but I think it's fairly early on where it says my thoughts are meaningless, and it just hit me like, you know, a massive like somebody just punched me. You know, for a couple of days I was just walking around like my thoughts are meaningless. Immediately it just kind of started to take me out of this just automatic, you know, if we are sleeping and dreaming, it's just this habit of automatically giving permission to these thoughts and maybe not even realizing we're believing them. And a lot of us have ideas, I've certainly had myself, that mind is difficult to overcome, that it has a lot of power, that I'm going to have to be some kind of superhuman to overcome it somehow. And that's what the awakened beings have somehow got, this extra muscle that nobody else has. But right from that very first lesson, it just started to wipe those ideas away, which was just amazing. I think we've discussed it in our session, but I just found I've always been really impatient, and I wanted awakening now. You know, I wanted to feel it now, and I looked at obviously the year-long lessons, and I just got very impatient. So I was looking for a faster, sort of more direct way, but it was amazingly powerful, the course. Absolutely. I remember at one point I was thinking of learning to teach it, you know, if they had that much of an effect upon me. I don't know if that answers your question. Or...
Yeah, but what I noticed about you, which has really helped me, is that it takes a long time with the course because we actually think that the self isn't the ego too. And because this is a dream about, you know, a Noumenon or just whatever, you know, we call the Noumenon or God. And so I was always fighting it. Like I would resist it because I would think, oh, as soon as I would go back into story, I would become resistant. And the ego is a resistance. That's all it is. If we accept it, then it's easier. So I think the course is beautiful. And I think all the books are beautiful. But, you know, when we're fighting with the very thing that is resistance, we're not going to get it. So when I've had sessions with you, you have said to me things that have helped me accept the ego. And by accepting the ego, it is not hurting me like it used to. And that
it's only ego that would reject ego. You know, the self would never reject anything. And I mean, at some point, just all of this rejecting, trying to get rid of ego, is coming from ego.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to bring to the, for everybody to see, because so many people, and I'll speak for myself, I really did struggle with the, the ego being, because the Course says it's suspicious and then vicious. And I have seen my thoughts, and they can be, but it's time to let go, because all they are is thought. And that's the thing that I want to bring home to everyone, that I've learned from you, is that just being here right now, it's just this, and then watching the thoughts in the space, they kind of go away. So
the moment you turn towards them, and I think that the thing that really shifted for me was a willingness to feel bad temporarily, as in to feel this negative emotion or whatever was coming from ego, as we were talking about with some of the previous questioners, being willing to feel that temporarily, overturning the human search for pleasure all the time to feel better, just temporarily being willing to feel what I'm feeling, and then that's happening inside the piece as well. Turning that around was pivotal for me to learn to do. By pushing against this, I'm never going to get rid of it. It's going to be here forever, and I'm going to have to keep pushing.
So I'm just skimming through the pages to see if anyone has their hand up. You can also raise your hand if you're on the participant link, or you can type in chat. Oh, Dawn has a question. Yeah, sorry, Dawn.
So I was just recently exposed to this book, and it almost feels like a crucial key to a puzzle. It's called This Extraordinary Moment. And there's this powerful practice where even with anxiety or sadness, what it is like what you're saying. You're welcoming the feeling. You're willing to sit with it forever, how long, and you are that welcoming presence. Now, I intellectually get it totally that I am the awareness, but what's powerful in this practice is when you get out of the head and into the actual felt sense of, like, let's just use sadness, for example. And you ask, in this practice, he says, ask, what does it consist of? And just keep drilling down. Like, and usually when I get down, the answers that come is like energy or like vibration. And then I'll ask, well, what does that consist of? And there comes this point where it toggles between the answer of like, I don't know. And it's a real felt sense all through the whole top of me, all the way through of, I really don't know the answer to this. Or like today, something came in, God. That felt like the answer. And then I'm like, well, what does God consist of? And then I'm just like completely dumbfounded. And from what I can sense and see is there's a possibility that is the answer. That I can't even describe it. Mystery is God, is what I am, and is the very thing that I've been looking for. Just want to hear your take on what I just shared.
That's really beautiful what you just said. It was exactly like that for me. I remember realizing at one point that I'd only ever experienced my projections about fear or guilt. Like, I'd never actually just been scared. I'd always experienced what I thought about that, because we are already that powerful self. And if I believe that fear is going to take a long time to pass, or that when it comes, it's going to overwhelm me, or whatever thoughts I have about a particular emotion or an energy, that I'd only ever experienced those projections. I'd never actually just sat with something, like you were saying, and the questioning, what is this? It was just so powerful, because it made me see there was all these different layers of answers. If I'm experiencing a fear, for example, I can experience what I think about it, or I can experience what it actually is. And it just, I think, as you just described so well, there's this moment where I recognize this is it. This fear is exactly what I've been searching for. It might seem like a crazy thing to say, but God can show up as fear. or the self can show up as guilt. It's just another energy frequency. And the only reason it feels bad is because I'm doing this. Go away. I don't want you in this way. I want you to come as peace or joy or love or something that feels good. But then it only feels bad because I'm really believing my previous memories from fear or shame or whatever it is. And anything can be turned back into peace with this question, what are you actually? And I really fell in love with, instead of fearing when these things came up for me, I began to really enjoy this, getting to know them again. I don't know if that kind of rings a bell with you, but it was really a very visceral felt sense that I'd never really experienced reality, that I'd only ever experienced what I thought was going on, even about this kind of sort of heavy emotional things coming up from all my previous ideas about myself.
Thank you.
Wonderful questions, really amazing questions.
There's a question from Audrey that she's just typed in the chat.
Okay.
And she says, Helen, with your children, have you let go of the I am a parent belief to allow them to experience their own path? How do you parent with enlightenment? That makes sense. And if Audrey, if you want to chat, the mic's all yours.
Yeah, this was a big one for me. I really held myself back with this idea that I wouldn't be able to be a mother or a sister or a friend, and especially around my children. I felt like if I'd let go of that idea, then somehow I'd be less of a parent than I was. And I really eventually got around this by realizing, but I am already the self. So there's nothing for me to let go of. This is an idea that's happening in mind. And that if I believe I've got to even let go of that, I'm going to give myself an impossible job. And that the self is playing the role of a mother and a child, and playing the role of a sister, and whatever, all these different ways, and even a teacher now, it's just playing that role. So these ideas are very precious to mind, but it's only because we love our children so much and we want to be a good parent that we're questioning, is it okay to let go of this idea? But I found the more ideas I let go of about myself, the more that my body and mind were just able to effortlessly function in all of the roles that they play. And every single one of my relationships has improved because of that. And I find myself completely at home in my life. Before, I was constantly plagued with this sense of unworthiness, especially around being a mother. And am I doing it right? Am I giving them enough? I think naturally as parents, we all want to make sure they get the best upbringing that is possible. And that's really, to be able to do that without this limiting idea, to know that everything that you're doing as a parent is coming from the highest place possible in that moment, is extraordinarily freeing. And it's a relationship then becomes an opportunity for love to just blossom and express itself, and respect and appreciation of each other, rather than as it was for me, and I think for many people, sort of living out my own projections about not being good enough, having to somehow unconsciously fulfill those projections. It's mine says it's a big step to take, but is that true really for you if you're already, the formless reality? And you'll never lose that role of being a parent. That's naturally how your body is moving, how your life is moving. And just like any idea that you let go of, your life gets better as a result of that. It's just a wonderful blossoming of love when you let go of these ideas. So I hope that's helpful. Lovely.
I'm just seeing if there are any other hands up. Anne?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm thoroughly enjoying this satsang. So as you were speaking, I'm struggling to put the thought in. I don't know that I can put this thought into words really well, but I'm about to try. So when I sat in your satsang, and you brought us into what you called the Buddha nature, and you just brought us very present. You just had us notice that this present moment's already it's holding everything. It's what's here. It's what is. And you just kind of held that for us. I mean, for me, and I could. It was just this very kind of loving, relaxed, feeling at home. Feeling free. We have in this group, one of our kind of core practices is getting to the same, what feels to me like the same place. But I kept toggling back and forth between just the holding of the Buddha nature, of this present moment, of just the letting that be. There's no letting, but a kind of a recognition of being held in it, versus this practice that I don't know that it's versus, but what I want to take that and then put next to it is the practice that we do, where we go in and we kind of find the awareness that we're naturally aware. That's the only reason we're aware of objects is because we're already aware that the objects are feeling or not feeling. And then we kind of turn the lens around and say, where is that awareness? From where is it emanating? Where is it coming from? And that probably is making it too much of a doing, but I don't know how to do it smoother with words. So my question is, there was a point in the just holding the present moment where I would come back and kind of reference into my awareness, the awareness I experience. And I heard you say something about notice if you're wanting to go back and kind of reference your own reference point, and maybe just soften or let that go. And so my question is, there's a little bit of a sense when I just let the present moment be and I just have that be what holds me, that it feels a little dissociative. Not that that's good or bad, but I know I have a tendency to just want to bliss out. I just want to just feel good and have that be it. And so there's this, I don't know if this question makes any sense, but
It's making perfect sense, yeah.
Okay.
You're talking about my own awakening here, yeah.
So there's a sense inside that just to let this moment just be the moment, just hold that knowing. And so this going back and touching into awareness and then coming back out, that toggle, it didn't feel necessary at all. It felt like it kind of cut through it. And yet I'm just interested in whatever your point was, if there was one, about coming back in and referencing yourself and whether that's helpful, not helpful, or and that's the best I can do with words.
I think you did very well. Yeah, the referencing, from when I was starting to recognize what was true, there was a necessary, as you described, noticing of awareness, and then a questioning, looking at, there was a sense I'm aware of the awareness, and that they were different things. And I think that's often a necessary starting place for a lot of people. It was for me, or the sense that I'm listening to silence, or I'm resting in the stillness. So there was that necessary a kind of a doingness to recognize the self in whichever way we're recognizing it. But I think as you do progress, that becomes just an unnecessary step. It begins to, even before you start to look for the awareness, it's just obviously present, or whether you call it the now or the present moment, silence. We're just cultivating a habit really to focus or to pay attention without our senses, to pay attention to that which we can't sense with our eyes and ears, and we can't necessarily think about. So once that habit is developed to automatically look that way first, then it's developed, and we can sort of let go of any necessary props or steps before that. When I really first started, I had to really ask myself the question, am I aware? Yes, I am aware. And then there was a noticing of awareness, and then a greater and greater recognition of what that awareness was, that it wasn't just here. And then to allow that to expand, to realize that that awareness is infinite. But there was a gradual letting go of any process in that, and it came just more as a seeing. It definitely felt like a doing to start with. I don't know if that's helpful. And eventually, even to notice the present moment that's here, there would still be just a little sense that I'm noticing it from here, which I was trying to sort of guide towards the end of that investigation that we did the other night. Just to recognize that even the sense I'm noticing this present moment is not really strictly true. It's the present moment noticing itself, just to let go of that little bit of duality that makes it a kind of doingness. Does that, hopefully that explains what you were asking.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is you just kind of gently allow that to fall away, and not listening to any chatter that might guide me back to a doing, just to kind of see it as a thought, let it go, and just kind of stay.
Yeah, we all need some kind of steps really to notice at first, because even if I say, if somebody comes to Satsang for the first time and I say, right, notice this present moment, and they go, oh yes, immediately then the force of habit is going to go back to looking at phenomena, looking at thoughts, looking at emotions, looking at and doing and trying to do. That is the force of habit. So quite often when spiritual practice, we'll be given something to do, a spiritual kind of doing at first, perhaps asking a question or some way to reference our starting point in our experiencing of the real self. But gradually, as your identity shifts from someone who's noticing the self, the more time you spend recognizing the self, the more your identity is automatically shifting to, but I am that awareness. And then as that gets clearer, for me, it was just more and more obvious the more times I recognized the awareness that I'd always been that. It went from, I really have to notice this awareness, I have to pay attention to it. And eventually just an effortless, well, it's here, it's always here. There isn't anything I need to do about it. So it just started off as a process and a practice, and just became an effortless state of being that's just constantly obvious. It didn't start that way, but in that process there's a letting go as identity shifts of, I'm looking at the awareness, to recognition, I'm looking from the awareness at the awareness, or I'm looking at thoughts or whatever the awareness is looking. And then there's no more sort of need to do anything to get there. That it just becomes more, you're just returning back to your natural state, where we don't need any introduction to that eventually.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful question.
Anyone else have a question? I'm going to flip through these screens to see anyone's sitting with their hand up and I can't see them.
Helen,
Sharon?
Could you tell us how we, because I've read your books and they're so interesting, like, because we know we're not bodies, but we're sensing that we're bodies. Can you talk a little bit about this sensing that, because, what's coming through now is that my parents really were never here. I just imagined them, which is kind of shocking right now, very shocking. And I haven't gotten to this yet, the self-sharing, but I have a deeper looking that this whole thing I imagined. So the body, how do we really like let go of the body? Your books actually tell us that, because you take things apart, just like we talked about, like scientifically, which I think is so beautiful. But, I think that's what is holding me back, because, I talk about pain in the body, and then the whole story comes up. How do you let go of this thing? Or you don't?
It's just a question, the ideas really about that we have around our body. We all start off with a real conviction that this is a real solid body, and it feels like it, doesn't it? It really feels, and it's very convincing. But gradually, as we see what's real about ourselves more and more, then it's going to become clear that everything that arises out of the self or appears in the self is going to be the same material. That if I only have awareness to start from, that anything that arises is going to be that awareness, even if it looks like something solid. So as that sort of conviction is growing inside, then you're going to sort of question. For me, it just became really important to find out if there were any objects, like a human body, which sounds like a really weird thing to say, because I'm using it to talk through right now. But as the recognition deepened that this isn't really a body, it's awareness taking a particular shape, condensing down, like the water vapor in this room is invisible and intangible right now, but I'm breathing it in as I breathe. And if we cool down the temperature in the room enough, the water would turn to liquid, it'd start to run down the windows. And if we cooled it even more, it would be solid ice, so that nothing is solid per se. It's always including our own body. That really, as you were saying, what I thought my parents were, there were human bodies appearing, but all of my ideas about my parents are really in here, and in my sister's brain, and in my mom and dad's brain. All these ideas are just being shared. There are appearances of human body, but where are these other beings really? And it's very, very shocking at first, when we first sort of recognize I've been imagining all these other beings that aren't really separate to me or outside of me. It can be very shocking.
Yeah, sometimes, like, this has happened to me over the weekend. Like, I had a whole story, that, about my mother, and she was never here. And I'm like, really getting that. And it's like, at one point I start laughing, and another point I get scared. Because, it's polarities. It's just living in the duality of it all. But we talked about something on Friday about the body, and I had it in the tip of my tongue. It might come back, but the idea of, I can't remember now, so I'm going to let someone else ask, because I know I can write you, but it is what I'm experiencing now is a shift, that I imagined. And I'm a little bit scared, and I'm crying off and on, because it is just what the body does. I'm not trying to make a big thing out of it.
It's important to remember that, that your parents weren't there as a separate being, but they were always there as the self.
Right.
That the love that you felt, everything that's happened has happened in a way because it's a self already. It's only really our ideas about those beings that weren't so true. Our projections about them that weren't so true. So it's not. There's a sense. There was a huge sense for me as I really began to realize this, that I was going to lose something really valuable. Like, suddenly I wouldn't be able to see my sister as my sister anymore. And if I realized she wasn't separate to me, I wouldn't be able to have a relationship with her. But it was the opposite, actually. There was it was a shock, but then to realize she's always been the self, and it's always been the self talking to itself, playing these roles. And as that became clearer, then there was an emergence of a real love, and totally allowing everyone in my life to be how they are, without demanding things from them energetically all the time. So that's
Yeah, and I
kind of
just,
cushions that fear.
yeah, the thing we talked about was that we're a corpse, really. Without the self, we are a corpse. And I saw that when my father died. And I read that in Sailor Bob's book, that we're just a corpse. And now I'm starting to live it. There's a Byron Katie book that she's talking to somebody about someone that died, and they couldn't stop saying Rodney, Rodney. And she said, "What do you want to dig him up?" And the woman started to laugh. She actually didn't want Rodney because he's already underground. So that's the thing about this whole. I think that the help we get from you is essential because, and I know that's your life's work, to just be able to have because we're all here because we're supposed to be, and we're blessed to have this. But it's amazing to have this kind of help. Thank you for everything.
It's lovely. It's the recognition as well deepens within you. There'll be more of a seeing that you're only going to gain from this. What feels like a huge sacrifice to mind is really a glorious unfolding. Like, what happens if I let go of all my ideas about all these other beings and just experience what they actually are? Like we were talking about with the emotion, asking what the emotion actually is. I remember sitting one day and saying, what is my sister really? I was sat there with her one day and I was feeling irritated or something. And I just, well, what really is? I'm irritated at my ideas about her. And that's stopping me from really loving her as she is. And suddenly there was this willingness to let go of those ideas and to actually find out who she is. And we're closer now than we've ever been, which is a miracle for us because we're similar in age. We always used to, argue and rub each other up the wrong way. But when there's a willingness to let go of these ideas, and a recognition they've been limiting our ability to love because we've been coming from a place where we want respect, or we want approval, or we want acceptance, recognition, love, or we want this being to make us feel safe, or we want something from them. But when we don't have those ideas anymore, there's just a natural intimacy with every being that you experience and right as they are. And it's a wonderful thing. It feels like a scary thing to mind to walk around not knowing anything about anyone, but it is the most beautiful and natural state. And everyone begins to respond to that around you. They just feel you might be the only person they ever meet that doesn't demand anything from them, not verbally, but in their energy. So just wanted to add that.
On this point, I listen to you, and there's my willingness is amplified by God knows how many zeros. And then I was coming this morning to sort of sitting and looking back in awareness, watching awareness, and I could just see this thought that was like, it's far more interesting to be a person right now. And I gave it, some space, but it did jolt me, and I thought, my God, I don't think my willingness is like really, really there, and you need willingness to be able to do it. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about willingness, and if you had any sort of resistance on your path, because we always think, everyone who's done it must have just been like 100%.
Oh, it was easy, yeah. I just clicked my fingers and all mine disappeared. It's it really wasn't like that at all. But one thing I really did realize, willingness, it's really good questions today. If I am holding any idea that I need to be more willing, or that it's difficult to let go of these things, then I'm going to keep experiencing that. But willingness, like anything, is within us in potential. And if we can just, if it becomes clear that I could use a little more willingness to let go of something, perhaps, then just to allow that to come forth. That whatever we seem to need, we can either try to get it through our person or from a blossoming of the real self, whether it's courage or, Sharon was just saying, courage to kind of go a little beyond all these ideas, or a willingness that when I just ask for them, those qualities to begin to be expressed, and recognize that every awakened being must have done this same thing. It must have felt a bit risky to let go of the familiar, even though it was not always comfortable. It was familiar to be someone. And really just to recognize that you're not being asked to choose, which, you know, ego says you've got to choose self or person. And you got to pick one or the other because it sees them as opposites, or two options. But the self is not even trying to choose. You know, so ironically, choosing the self, you get to be a person too. You get to play as a person with likes and dislikes and all of that. And sometimes that person plays in a negative way. You know, I've got these ideas about myself, that type of thing. But recognizing, do you even have to choose there? You know, that something's trying to pick one or the other. Is that my particular battle? Can you get a sense of it?
Yeah.
Because if you keep choosing one and trying to get rid of the other, you're going to have to keep swinging back and forth. And I did that for quite some years, and it wasn't really all that successful. But it's like anything. If you ask, it will be. You are already the self, the Noumenon. So if you ask for that willingness to see this, or to let go of whatever, it will be given immediately from inside. It's a kind of a shortcut that just to want to be willing to move beyond it has to happen, even if right now I don't feel willing. Even the Buddha, you know, he had to go sit under the Bodhi tree and say, right, I'm sitting here until it's done, I'm not moving. You know, so he obviously had his own little challenge going on there. You know, and Christ went into the desert as well, you know, to experience temptation in that way, and found that willingness from inside. That every single being that's woken up has gone through exactly that same process.
It's funny, I just always, you know, think some people want it more and that's why they get it. But I guess I have no idea what they want. I'm just guessing.
I think everyone starts off with some amount of desire to recognize and be the self, but also some huge pull to stay where it's familiar. And the thing that really helped me was just to recognize I don't have to fight that urge to go back to the familiar. Because if I start to fight it, then I'm coming from ego again. If I just accept when those times when I seem to go back, you know, do my best to accept that nothing's gone wrong, and just then gently invite this seeing of the real self to go deeper, to not turn it into a epic struggle, you know, that we're so good at doing, and to declare that we're doing it wrong if we're going back into mind or ego. You know, that was always my first conclusion. I spent a whole day identified with the mind again. Obviously, I'm no good at this awakening lark, that, you know. And in the end, it's like, well, it just happened. It doesn't mean anything unless I say it does. I still love the truth. We're still going to get there. It's just a sense of how you handle it, isn't it?
Yeah, like it sounds so simple. It's so great. But Dawn, do you have a question?
I just have another question. Just if this is a helpful practice. So as you heard from a couple members of our community Awakening Together, we do this thing called awareness watching awareness. I noticed you said that's helpful for a time, but eventually just you get it, you are aware, and then that's it. So one thing that came to me about a week and a half ago was something new, because for me, I've struggled with this whole awareness watching awareness. And for me, it felt quite dry. Like I don't really know how to describe it besides that. And so when I'm meditating for a while now, especially lately, I'll feel this life force energy. It almost feels like vibrant electricity, almost like champagne bubbles going all throughout my body, my system. And sometimes it dials down, sometimes it dials up. But what came through as an insight was that this energy itself is aware. Because I would notice when because one of our things too is rely on intuition to guide you in all things, what we call the Holy Spirit or inner guidance. So as I would ask a question and I'm like, okay, Holy Spirit, what would you like me to do now? And I'll feel that energy just like bubble up when it's something to move towards. And I won't feel that when it's something not. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. I think this, whatever that thing is, life force, energy, awareness, whatever you want to call it, I think it's aware. So then I was like, well, wait a minute. What if that's how I could practice awareness, watching awareness, is just noticing that life force or whatever it is aware. And then that's awareness, watching awareness, and boom. And not one time while doing this thing, whatever it is, has it felt dry. In fact, it feels so alive, so just, it's hard to describe, just wonderful. And then at the very end, it's so potent and alive that I don't even want to stop at times. My boyfriend will be knocking at the door and I'm like, I don't want to get up. It feels so good. And then there's this sense of well-being. So I just wanted to maybe just, am I on the right track with this?
Yeah, you definitely. One of the things I recommend is to find the right way for you, because there'd be times when I could sit and notice awareness and it felt good, and then times it felt like a chore and I just didn't want to. But there would be a sense of silence just ringing in my ears, and I just wanted to sit and listen. And I just, like you just described, never want to stop that at all. Sometimes it would feel more like stillness. There'd just be this sort of descending field of stillness that would come all over me. And I thought I was going the wrong way, or sort of being drawn away from the practice. But I recognize it's the self that is showing itself in all of its different facets. And if you look at awareness, it is silent and it is still, it's just here. And silence is intelligent like the awareness. It's all, whether it presents itself as a sense of presence or a sense of just pure intelligence, or whichever way it's coming. And some people I've noticed, they like to notice the awareness. Others like to feel things. They're quite, they want to feel sensation. And it's they'll be, so they'll feel for this, they'll listen for the silence, which is quite a visceral, tangible thing sometimes in the body. So it's really about finding the right way for you. It's like in any moment, the self is showing itself to us in all these different ways. Sometimes it's just a sense of being here. Sometimes we can notice the present moment, the sense of it being eternally present now. Sometimes it's a quite obvious silence, and just finding out which way. Your body will absolutely tell you which is the right way. If I had to sit and be aware of awareness, I'd be like the longest meditation session ever, and after like 3 minutes, there's a time to go and have a cup of tea. Then I sit there and listen to the silence, and as you just said, a whole period would just disappear of time, completely gone. And so it's finding which one works for you, because then it's a joy, it's not a chore, and it will start to move from something you're just sitting down and doing at a certain time each day to just, you'll be noticing it when you're walking around or when you're doing sort of other tasks that don't involve so too much attention being given. They'll start to come into your experience, the real self, even then, until it becomes effortless and constant. But it's absolutely a sign for me what you said, that you can feel your body responds to it, you can feel a life force respond to it. This is the right way for me. It's like we're all some kind of lock, and we've got to find the right key. So it's it doesn't really matter anyway whether we call it energy or awareness or silence. It's all that self anyway. But it's finding out what works for you. Definitely.
Anyone else have anything they want to share or ask? And I'll just toggle these screens, see if there's anyone I'm missing. I don't think so. I wanted then, we've got sort of 15 minutes left, and we can, you know, I have some questions here I can give you, or Helen, would you be interested in leading us in a little bit of a guided meditation?
Yeah, that would be be a lovely way to finish. Yeah, to just do that. So so just as you're sitting and watching this, listening to this, we're just going to spend a few minutes allowing this moment to be as it is. So that means really just whatever is showing up for you in your external environment, whatever noises are coming and going, whatever internal noises are happening, thoughts, emotions, sensations. Just for a few moments, we're going to allow those to be completely as they are. And so if we've got any urge to change something, or if we're looking to even go into a deeper state, just going to let go of any agenda that we have in this moment, even to find peace, even to find the self. Just a natural allowance of however the self wants to appear in this moment as you. If that's thoughts, it's thoughts. If it's a silent mind, it's a silent mind. If there is any positive or negative states happening, just give them complete permission to exist. And naturally, as we're just allowing this moment to be, we're naturally allowing ourselves to completely be. Just beginning to recognize how that feels inside our own being, inside your own body, inside your own mind. You're not demanding anything from yourself or from this moment. How does that feel when you let go of trying to change anything? And when you let go of trying to become someone or something in this moment? And instead just beginning to recognize that which is already here. That there is something already here that doesn't need to change. Something about you that is already peaceful. And that there really isn't anything else that needs to happen to you or for you. And it may just begin as a sense of contentment, relaxation. And just begins to deepen into a deeper peace. That whatever we are experiencing in this moment is exactly what we're supposed to be experiencing. There doesn't need to be anything different at all in this moment. Just giving yourself permission to be authentically yourself right now, whatever that is in this moment. Having no shoulds or shouldn'ts about yourself. Letting go of any desire to change anything. And really more discovering what's already here. Naturally, as you're just allowing everything to be, not labeling good or bad, or wanted and not wanted. There is a spaciousness about you that begins to present itself. That we don't even need to try to find peace. Perhaps our very search for peace is disturbing us. And gently moving with the question, what is here right now? What is here when I just let go of trying to control and change? What else is there of me that I haven't discovered and explored as yet? We're just cultivating a gentle openness. Willingness to just discover rather than trying to become. A willingness to explore if there's more to this moment than we've previously noticed. To see if, in fact, this moment has anything missing from it at all. What is really here now? Again, just recognizing how your body feels, how your mind feels. And we're no longer trying to become something, to get to somewhere. What do you look like with no agenda, with no intention. What do you feel like when you're just discovering rather than reaching? What is it like to be authentic? A choice to discover and explore is a choice we can make in any moment. And if you allow yourself to enjoy how it feels to discover yourself, ever deepening into what this moment, to what yourself really is, you can fall in love with that. This wonderful paradox of never fully realizing, always deepening, and yet at the same time already completely whole, already just perfect as you are. So in a few moments we're going to open our eyes and we'll begin to move our bodies again. But we don't have to let go of this spirit of discovery, of this openness. And we don't have to rush back to doing and becoming. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
It's been so lovely to have you. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who came.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful questions. They've been very, very intelligent questions.
I did want to just again mention your website, helenhamilton.org, and that you offer live satsang twice a week. You have a YouTube channel as well. It's all information is on your site. And we'll be playing this at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and it's a recording. Dawn's recorded it, so it will be on our website too for people who want to re-listen. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.